So naturally, there's a slight increase as it goes south, but this house is now very high above where the rest of it is. But the city of Beech Grove came in and they did some required some work to address the runoff. We appreciate the city doing that, but it did not change the impact of privacy of the adjacent neighbors have felt. The builder built the house so high that they had to bring in thousands and thousands of dollars worth of dirt to build up the grade to the level of the home. And you can see that if you look at the porch and some of the pictures that are in the application. So now we have a situation where their back door is at a level above my fence, even in the back with the 7 foot. And I have a photograph that's in the materials I handed out to you in the back. There's 2 photographs. One, the first photograph shows you that was taken this morning from my back door. And you can see the neighbor's grill and their back door are above my fence as currently constructed. If the house had been built on the natural grade that my house and the adjacent houses were built, there would have been no need for, we may not even needed a 6 foot privacy fence. The second item, and is equally as important, if not more, is the public safety issue. We've had multiple public safety issues recently in the neighborhood within the last year or so. My kids are homeschooled. They play in the backyard every day. And there's been an increasing need to remedy this situation. I'm going to walk through some of the things that we've seen. You may not be aware of this, and there are 2 homeless camps in our neighborhood. One is along Lick Creek. If you go down Classen Lane, and the Lick Creek kind of goes through the neighborhood, and there's a bunch of trees. There's one down there, and then if you go on Rotherham, heading this direction, and it turns into a cul-de-sac, there's some back in there as well. This summer we had at least 2 instances of homeless people wandering the neighborhood. Now look, my heart goes out to these people. I hold nothing against them, but it's not a safe situation. One person came through the backyards of our neighborhood, of our properties, in tattered clothes, a missing shoe, presented as if he was under the influence. My kids are outside playing. They came running in. My neighbor to the immediate south of me was sitting on her back porch, and he came up to her and accosted her. The second issue, and this is more of a long-running issue, and is the vicious dogs in the neighborhood. We have 2 sets of vicious dogs. One dog killed my neighbor to the Norse dog a year or so ago, or I forget the time frame, but it was since I've lived there. And then we've had multiple instances of some other vicious dogs getting loose and trying to jump the fence, or our old fence, I should say, and bashing the gates on the fence to try to gain access with their head. And if they were trying to jump a 4-foot fence that was previously there, if I would to put a 3-foot fence that the county ordinance is required along that side, I have a feeling that there would be no issue for them to jump that fence. And these aren't, I've seen these dogs in action. The neighbors have done some work to help contain them, so I don't want to say they're avoiding it, because they're not, but it takes one instance for my kids who are out back every day playing. They're out back every day playing. On more than one occasion, I've had to scramble to get the kids inside, retrieve my firearm, but this is no longer an issue because of the fence we have installed now. Third, over the past year, we've started seeing coyotes in the neighborhood, believe it or not. I didn't believe it the first time I heard about it. I thought, oh, that's crazy. It's not a coyote. And then I saw it a few days later. They have been in the front yards at all times of day, which is surprising because they're nocturnal animals. And they seem to have no fear of humans. One in particular that I've seen on a couple occasions looks emaciated. It was at like 1 in the afternoon. And I've been fearful that it's looking for food, or, there might be some kind of other, basically it seems to be acting boldly. Now, I've not seen any instances happen, but that's a little unsettling, right? We're in an urban area. There's coyotes, walking in our front yards. And then fourth, and I have a photograph. This is the last photograph. We have some neighbors down Rotherham Lane that frequently light off fireworks in the street without any regard to the neighborhood, it seems like. Shortly after the fence installed, and that's what this is a photograph of, they were out around 9 p.m. lighting off fireworks in the street. The fireworks were hitting the houses close to them and cars, and one firework hit our fence. The police came and stopped it because we have great police force who's very responsive here. However, if it hadn't been for that fence, that firework would have accessed my backyard without any problem. I mean, it hit the fence. And like I said, they did hit numerous other houses and vehicles in the neighborhood. So the last thing I want to talk about is some of the letters, and I gave you all these, and I think some of them are in the application, but these are support letters in support of the variance requests in the fence. As you can see, we have obtained numerous letters of support for the construction of the fence. Mayor Kaufman wrote a letter. City County Councilor Frank Mascari wrote a letter. City Council President Chris Duffer also wrote a letter in support. And I want to take a moment to talk about Councilor Duffer's support. Chris is really good friends with my neighbor to the south, my immediate neighbor. When the weather is nice, they frequently sit out back at their house and they read Bible verses together, do a Bible study. He's also represented our neighborhood on 3 separate occasions. He just started his 3rd time representing us. So he's been intimately aware of all of these issues. And he's watched firsthand as my neighbor's backyard and the issues that they've had, and he knows all about the public safety issues. So Chris, I really appreciate his support on this because he knows firsthand what's happened. We've received numerous letters of support from all of our adjacent neighbors, and I got to say, when we started this endeavor, we talked to everybody. We did not want to put anything in our yard that was going to be a problem for all of our adjacent neighbors. We've been there over 8 years now. We have a good relationship with all of our adjacent neighbors, and we wanted to make sure that they were aware and were supportive. So we did that at the front end, and now we have letters of support from everyone I was able to talk to over the holiday period. I'm going to read just a few of those to you because not everyone could be here today. So let's see. So from my neighbor across Rotherham Lane, to whom it may concern, I'm a neighbor of 905 Classen Lane. Given the change in elevation to 904 Valburn Court, home immediately adjacent to the east, I support approval of the variance of development standards for the placement of privacy fence. The large increase in the elevation 904 Valburn Court has impacted the neighborhood and reduced privacy of adjacent neighbors. Approval of this petition will mitigate the impact without negatively impacting the aesthetics of the neighborhood or city. That's from Hyla Spathy at 1142 Rotherham Lane. To whom it may concern, I am a neighbor of 905 Classen Lane. I support approval of variance development standards for the placement of a privacy fence. Approval of the petition will not negatively impact the aesthetics of the neighborhood or the city. From Ryan and Brandy Garrigus, 904 Valburn Court. That's the home immediately to the east. To whom it may concern, I'm a neighbor of 905 Classen Lane. Given the change in elevation 904 Valburn Court, the home immediately adjacent to the east and 905 Classen Lane, I support approval of the variance of development standards for the placement of a privacy fence. The large increase of elevation to 904 Valburn Court has impacted the neighborhood and reduced the privacy of adjacent neighbors. Approval of the petition will mitigate this impact without negatively impacting the aesthetics of the neighborhood or city. Dylan Etheridge, 1124 Rotherham Lane. I think I skipped a couple. Some of these folks may have signed up to speak, so I'm going to read the letter anyway, just to, well.
Judge, at your discretion, we can note that the letters are submitted.
Okay, great, thank you.
You can read which ones you want to. We don't want to say you can't, but we can note that all of them are in the record as well.
Okay, then I'll just leave it at that. So I guess without, I guess I'll just note, 1112 Rotherham Lane, wrote a letter, and 1130 Rotherham Drive, wrote a letter in support. Those are all the neighbors immediately across the home to the north of me. My wife's going to come up and read a letter from my neighbor immediately to the south. I want to thank everybody for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I wasn't here a few months back doing it in the proper order. But I hope you will see from everything that's been submitted the need for the requests we've put forward, and I respectfully submit to the BZA for approval of our variance. So thank you very much.
Okay, just a moment. Does the board have any questions for the judge?
I do. Your Honor, did you get a survey done before you put the fence up?
I have a survey that was, or I guess I should say I have plot lines. I did not have a survey itself. I have plot lines that I included as part of the application, which is my understanding was sufficient as part of the application.
Did the plot lines come from the recorder's office, or did they come from the plans from your?
They came from the recorder's office.
Okay.
Just a quick question. The letter from John Goebel.
Yes.
I read through the whole thing. It does say at the beginning it's to remonstrate, but it does seem it is to.
It is a letter in support. I think he misused the language.
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that when I put it in the
It
record.
is,
in the notes.
yeah, because if you read that letter, you can see it's supportive.
I just wanted to clarify for the
Yeah,
record.
right, correct.
Your Honor, how many years have you been at this
That's a no.
location?
We moved to that location in the summer of 2015, and so it is, what, is that over 8 years now? About 9 years? No, going on 9 years, yes.
The neighbor that's behind you that we're referring to, how long have they been there?
Their house was completed in June, I believe.
Thank you.
And I should add that and you'll see this at the two lots south of us, and as you go down, there was a natural line of trees that went along the property line from Rotherham all the way down between the houses. And when the builder came in to build the house behind us, they took out all of them except the ones on the property line on both sides, so to the south and to the west. And if those would have been left, we probably wouldn't even have a fence at all. We would have just stuck with the original structure. But the elevation and the complete clearing changed the need, for sure.
I just wanted to get clarity as well. So you said that you did read the ordinance in the beginning, but you misunderstood it?
Correct, yeah. I mean, that's totally on me. I admittedly am not a land use lawyer, and I made a mistake in that regard, and so I'm here today to get down the right path and make up for that oversight.
Any more questions from the board? None seen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have 15 minutes for remonstrators. Do we have any remonstrators in the room? None seen. However, we do want to put this on record that we do have the letter, the remonstrator letter. Staff, could we hear from you?
Thank you. For your record, Linda Albrand, representing the Department of Metropolitan Development. There are two variances being requested of you today. The one that's been talked about the most is the 7-foot tall fence along the eastern boundary line, which you can see best in my photo figure 3. It's the lattice part that's on top of the fence, and that's where it abuts the adjacent property that has been built up on a grade. Staff finds that because of the grade, there is a practical difficulty in securing privacy for the backyard of the property, and we are recommending approval of that part of the variance. The second request is to have the 6-foot tall fence along the street or along the sidewalk, right along the sidewalk. And the ordinance says that corner lots have 2 front yards. So you have to meet front yard requirements for fencing along both streets. So they would be permitted a 3.5-foot tall fence in the front yard along Rotherham. That does not say that they can't have a 6-foot tall fence in their backyard. It just means that it can't be in the front yard. And the front yard, by definition of the ordinance, is from the house to the street, so the established front yard. The purpose of the requirement of not having 6-foot tall fences along sidewalks, and you can see it most in my photo, figure 5, is that the front yards along streets are meant to be a semi-public space where you can see down the street, you can see things coming, you can see dogs or coyotes coming. So if you're walking down that sidewalk and there was something behind that fence, you could not see it until you were right on top of that thing that's behind the fence, a person, an animal, something like that. So you should be able to anticipate dangers that could be out there that if you're a person walking down the street should not have to worry about not being able to anticipate dangers. We also think that also in figure 5, you can also see that the petitioner's driveway exits in front of that fence. And a person walking towards you in that photo along the fence would not be able to effectively see someone backing out of that driveway until that car was pretty much right at where they would be walking. So for those reasons is why the requirement is in the ordinance. Staff certainly understands the need to want to have a 6-foot tall fence in your backyard. We are suggesting to you that maybe moving it 6 foot back off the sidewalk, not completely back to the house, but 6 foot back off the sidewalk would be enough to create that semi-public space that you can anticipate safety issues. This would, and I measured it on an aerial photo, would still leave 4,500 square feet of space in the backyard for their private space. So they would still have a 6-foot tall fence, they would still have the security that they want, but the public that's walking down the sidewalk would also have a sense of security while walking down the street. So we are recommending approval of the 7-foot tall fence, but denial of the 6-foot tall fence, but we would be accepting of the 6-foot tall fence if it were moved 6 foot in towards the property. That would still need a variance, but just 6 foot in. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Does the board have any questions for staff?
Yes, ma'am. On the front yard counting and the fact that you can only have certain height, is there a rule or not a rule about a privacy fence in the front yard? Is it supposed to be opened or can you have it closed?
You can have a solid fence at 3.5 feet. If you can see through it, you can have it at 4 feet in the front yard.
Okay.
And then you can have a 6-foot tall fence starting at the edge of the house.
Staff, could you remind the board again what the 3 provisions are that we're discussing?
So the board is required by state statute to find that there's a practical difficulty on the property, meaning that there's something about this property that's unique that not other properties in the area don't have, that there's something specific about this property that is called a practical difficulty, means it's difficult to meet the ordinance. And staff would suggest to you that there is not a practical difficulty to meet the ordinance for the front yard setback, that they can move it back and meet the ordinance without much difficulty. You're also supposed to find, through the findings of fact, that there's no impact on the safety and general welfare of the community. Although the petitioners presented safety issues to you, we would suggest that there are other safety issues at hand, mainly pedestrians walking down the sidewalk. But again, you're supposed to find something unique about this property that causes it to vary from the ordinance, not just because they want something that's like wanting a bigger backyard or something like that. And we would also suggest that a corner lot would not be enough to be a practical difficulty. There's corner lots all over Marion County.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. So you mentioned that a 3.5-foot fence does not have to be where you can see through it, correct?
Correct.
A 4-foot fence means that it has to be opaque or where you can see through that fence, correct?
Correct. In the
So-
front yard.
In the front yard. So looking at the front yard portion of the fence, I'm not sure that I can see through any of this even at the 6-foot level. It looks like it's solid to me.
It is a solid fence. We would not consider that to be able to be seen through at all.
So if we granted the fence to be moved back and left at 6 foot, would there still need to be some type of way to then see through it, since you're saying at 4 feet?
Well,
would be-
so what I'm suggesting to you is, I'm sorry I didn't let you finish there. What I'm suggesting to you is that they still need a variance. You should still grant a variance, but just that it's 6 foot back from, instead of right at the sidewalk. If you did not grant the variance, if you denied it, then they would have to lower it to 3.5 feet if solid, 4 feet if you can see through it, or move it back to the edge of the house.
Any more questions from the board?
And this would require 2 votes, the 2 on each variance, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you clarify what the 2 votes will be on? Maybe we could do,
Sure, yeah, so the first vote would be on the 7-foot tall fence variance request along the eastern boundary line. And the second vote would be on the 6-foot fence along Rotherham that we've just been discussing.
okay. Does the board have any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
If we grant these variances, are we setting precedent for future fences?
So precedent, no, because you're not bound by your decision in a definite way, but you certainly are signaling that for, as Ms. Albright said, for properties that are uniquely situated, that have these characteristics with a house behind them that is so far above grade and those kinds of issues. I don't know how many there are, but you are signaling that for those, the board would be receptive to allowing these variances. I think at least in one point in the past, the board has allowed a privacy fence in the front yard for another property. So consistency is important. I think that's the message more than precedent. Because precedent, when you're finding has to be that it's uniquely situated, doesn't really fully apply, because if it's uniquely situated, that means there's one, right, or very few. But there is a signal that you're sending that for properties that are found to be of a similar nature, that you're going to be consistent in your findings. So that way people can expect, hey, if somebody's going to raise a house, 10 feet above grade or whatever it is, I can probably go to the BZA and get some relief. But no, you're not going to be binding yourself to that if you don't find that unique situation down the road. Good question.
Any more questions from the board? Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let the petitioner come back up to the podium if you would like to. Did you want to come approach the podium and state your name, please? And
I guess I just had a question. I think my wife wanted to read one of the neighborhood letters. Is that okay? And I think my daughter had a statement she wanted to make. If not, we can go with the process. But
Yeah, you can do it at this point. In lieu of you talking, you can have them up here. And
okay.
do that,
And then
that's fine.
if there's other people that were supportive
that
and
was what I
wanted.
was going to follow up with. If you,
Yeah.
when you're finished, I wanted the rest of the supporters to come up.
Okay. Then yeah, I'll just let them come up. I will make one, I guess, comment that as you can see by the photographs, the second front yard we don't use as a front yard. It's not a front yard. It's our stoop. Everything's in the other side. And if If we didn't have a neighbor immediately across from where the fence location is, to my understanding, I think we would fit under the exception of the 2 front yard per the ordinance, but just for consideration. But I'll let the rest of my family comment if they want to at this time.
Okay, the next supporter, please approach the podium.
We make a motion.
And just state your name and who you're
Everybody in the audience
reading
is in
for.
full support of his variance request.
We gotta let him talk.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ashley Wells, and I was asked to read this letter to you guys from my neighbor, John Goebel. It says, and I want to clarify, these are his words. These are not my husband and I's thoughts or words. But I did tell him we would read it. It says, my letter is to demonstrate the grievance filed on the Wells property concerning a fence. I understand the primary line of thinking is that the Wells property has 2 front yards. The Wells property has 1 front yard. It has 1 front door, 1 front stoop. The front faces the west, just like mine. No one considers the side of a house with a garage door and 1 dormer window over the garage the front yard. Regardless of the president stating being on a corner gives anyone 2 front yards, the pictures below fully support the statements I stated above. It is very clear that we can decide which is the front yard. It says, during the past 2 years, the house on 904 Valborn Court was built. The city approved this property for occupancy. We, Andrew Wells and myself, had to fight with the city to force the contractor builder, Davis Homes, to install drainage to divert water runoff from flooding our backyard. The Davis Homes raised the elevation during the initial construction. Davis did not dig the basement at the proper level, and nobody really understands why. The gutter runoff is diverted, and the yard still has runoff to my property, eroding my backyard even further. The Wells then had a new neighbor who removed all the trees off the lot, exposing the back of the Wells home to the occupants of 904 Valborn Court. There was a natural barrier that was removed on an easement pictured below. The patio is 3 feet above the ground. This was brought to the attention of the city and the city engineers before the walls went up. It says nothing was addressed or even answered. It also shows that the city was negligent or basically ignored with no regard for the neighborhood and the conditions that will and are now affecting others' properties. Again, not my words, my neighbors. The fence was put up for 2 reasons. Homeless were wandering our neighborhood who are sleeping and residing frequently in the woods on the south side of Lick Creek. The Wellses had this fence installed for attempting to have some privacy from the backyard of the home. The other reason for the privacy fence is to shield the street view of the home, protecting the 6 children who play every day in the backyard. For whatever reason, some person or persons have complained to the city of Beech Grove and then went to the city of Indianapolis, who then tried to impose a $2,500 fine for code violations. What these people didn't do was ask the Willses why. September 16th, my wife was startled by a homeless man wearing 1 shoe and torn clothes he came up from the direction of Charnwood Parkway in the backyards of other people's homes. He told my wife he was being chased by dogs. There were no dogs. He most likely climbed someone's fence and was greeted by a dog. The man demanded water for my wife. With the amount of human and child trafficking going on in the world today, nowhere is immune, and making efforts to provide privacy and protect children playing in the backyard seems to have some people who are too thoughtless to ask the family why this fence went up. This fence also protects their children from vicious dogs who frequently get out and have already killed one of the neighbor's dogs. We called the police to have them come and collect the dog and force the people to make it nearly impossible for them to escape their backyard. I now wear a pistol in my home every day because of the experience with these dogs, and the dogs did enter the Wells backyard, and thankfully Andrew was out in the yard to protect his children playing. So whatever busybody who felt violated by the Wells protecting their home should be held responsible. If the fence is moved or modified, that results in actions detrimental to the Wells family. Better yet, ask why this fence went up to begin with, or mind their own business. The city bears some of this responsibility. Again, I'm sorry, not my words. I just wanted to add on what my husband said. we humbly ask you guys to please consider approving both these variances. We never imagined that our backyard would be considered a front yard. And we never wanted a privacy fence. For years, we had a chain link because we like to see the beautiful nature that was in our backyard. We just liked it feeling more open. But given the circumstances and all that my husband has shared, and all of the trees and foliage that were removed when the new home went up, it really took away our privacy. Everyone could see in our yard. And you could see in our yard all the way down the street when you would come in, all the way to the school. We decided to take that fence and put it where it was because we also have 3 trees. So if we move that fence in 6 more feet, it's going to hit trees. So we would either have to cut those trees down or we'd have to take the fence in more than 6 feet. It would be more like 10 to get past the tree line where that fence is on the side by the street. So for these reasons, I ask you guys to consider approving both variances for our family, for our children. We love living here. We love our home. We even love our new neighbors who built the house. It wasn't their fault. The unfortunate situation with their builders. Even they support our fence and they're very happy it's been up. I don't know if my husband included that, but you know, they're happy with it. They want to have one too, tie into ours. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have any more supporters that would like to speak?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Please approach and state your name.
My name is Beverly Rogers, and I live on Rotherham Lane, directly across from Ashley and Andrew, and I support their fence because I've seen coyotes. I have a wood line behind my house. I see coyotes there a lot. I also see, I don't want to say homeless people, but I do see them walking up and down my backyard. So I know they get across the street, and with those little kids, you can't take away their privacy because they built a fence. So I support their fence 100%. I live right across the street from them. That fence doesn't bother me. So that's all I have to say. But I do know there are coyotes and vicious dogs. I've had my neighbor to the west of me call me and say, make sure your dog's in the house. There's a vicious dog running around. So I support their fence.
Thank you. Any more supporters like to speak? Please approach and state your name.
Hi, my name is Scott Ferrer. I live in Beech Grove. I work for Beech Grove. And I was requested to take a look at the property and speak to it from a safety perspective. And after doing so, I don't have any problem with the variance. I don't have any problem with the fence. And here's the reason why. As far as vehicular traffic goes, if you are stopped at the stop sign on Classen and facing the north, your view to the east is approximately 300 feet before you even come close to having a view obstruction by the fence. As a matter of fact, if there are vehicles parked at the petitioner's driveway legally as to not encroach over or upon the sidewalk, you would see those vehicles before you saw the fence. So unless we're willing to tell the petitioner he's not allowed to park vehicles in his own driveway legally, those present more of a visual obstruction than the fence does. Furthermore, 300 feet is more than sufficient for any vehicle to stop. I did the calculation based on 30 miles an hour, even though the speed limit is 25 miles an hour on that street. And the average stopping distance comes out to 89 feet. You have 300 feet of clearance, which means even if you do pull out in front of somebody, they should have plenty of time to stop. You should have plenty of time to pull out and see anything coming from that direction. And that is at 30 miles an hour. Pedestrians aren't going to be coming that fast, all right, on the sidewalk. And bicycles shouldn't be on the sidewalk. They should be in the street. With regard to visual to the west, obviously that's a moot point because the fence isn't to your west. Vehicles on Valburn Court looking to their west where the fence is, again, because of the distance, your visual obstruction basically is non-existent because you can see all the way to the first house where the turn begins, kind of the Rotherham circle or court as it goes that way kind of bends a little bit to the north. So you can see there's absolutely no visual obstruction from the fence to the west if you're sitting on Valburn Court. So that wouldn't be an issue either. So my appraisal of the vehicular traffic is that there is no safety concern with that. The staff lady spoke of people walking on the sidewalk. As far as any kind of danger with the vehicle backing out of their driveway, there is more than 30 feet between the driveway and the beginning of the fence. So if somebody's walking on the sidewalk westbound along the fence, considering angles and things, you would have at least 35 feet to view the front of their garage to see anything pulling out. You would have even more line of sight to the end of their driveway where it meets the sidewalk. So you would have 50, 60 feet where the sidewalk actually meets the driveway to perceive anything in your line of travel on the sidewalk and react to it. At most pedestrian speeds, even if you're a jogger, that would be plenty of time to react to any kind of vehicle backing out of their driveway coming eastbound or going westbound. Furthermore, the line of sight for the people backing up would be about 45 feet. You know, unless you're backing out of your driveway at an extreme amount of speed, you should be able to react to anybody walking on the sidewalk and stop or slow down not to impede the pedestrian right of way. As far as walking eastbound on the sidewalk, there is no other right of way to impede. If there were a safety concern about somebody hiding in the woods or something, I think that the woods that were there before would impact the safety just as much as a blind corner at a fence would. And then you're immediately into the neighbor's yard anyway. And then the last thing I'd like to note is I would like to just remind that we are looking for a variance here. We're not looking for a way to bring the petitioner into compliance. He's asking for a variance, so he's asking for an exception. And from just listening to the testimony here today, I think there are two things that make an exception. Obviously, the elevation of the neighbor's house, but also in the moving of the fence back, you would have to cut down trees and remove foliage that creates shade for the neighbors and is usually appealing to most neighborhoods to have more trees. I mean, we're a tree city, I think. So I think cutting down trees in order to move a fence back 6 feet that doesn't seem to be an overbearing problem would be an undue hardship. Any questions?
So it's your evaluation that the fence next to the sidewalk doesn't pose a threat to anybody that's walking westbound down the sidewalk to the driveway or to any of the drivers backing out? Any children or people on bicycles going westbound next to the fence? Are you saying that there's absolutely no safety that could hurt them with not a warning sign where that fence is compared to the driveway?
I'm saying based on the sight lines and based on the amount of time and distance there is between the driveway and where the fence meets the sidewalk, where your vision is unobstructed, based on the amount of distance and sight lines there, I would say that I would never say that the safety is zero. You can't ever say that there is absolutely no chance that anything could happen at any intersection. We can't say that at this intersection. We can't say it at Churchman and Emerson. Something could happen, right? That's why accidents happen. Okay, but I would say that it's not a high percentage possibility. As a matter of fact, I'd put it at a very low possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from the board? No, none seen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more supporters would like to speak? Please approach the podium and state your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Spots. I live at 913 Valburn Court. And we were the second house in Section 2 of Carrington Addition. And we and the two houses next to me were very much in favor of the fence. We have no problem with the fence. We were denied privacy fences because of the Carrington organization, HOA, refuses anything over 4 feet. Privacy fences were not allowed. And one of my sisters was fined $1,200 when they started to put one up. I just want to say that most of the people on Valburn Court, because of the dogs mostly, are in favor of the fence. And by the way, I had a fox on my porch 2 weeks ago. So there are wild animals. You just have to be aware of it. But maybe after all this is over, maybe Beech Grove and Carrington could get together and decide, do we need these rules or don't we? Because nobody's following them. There's been a lot of people that were the first people in the area that were fined for different things they did. And they went to Beech Grove and got an okay variance, which I did for my back porch. And then Carrington came and said, you can't do that. So we had to work with different people like they did to get an okay. So maybe when all this is over, we can all work together in the neighborhood and make everybody happy. But like I said, I have no problem with the fence. I think it looks really nice. We weren't allowed to cut down any trees between our house and Rotherham Circle because there's a statement in the covenants that says it's a common zone and you can't cut down the trees. So maybe Davis should come in and plant some more trees. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any more supporters? Remonstrators? None seen. Okay, now the board's faced with someone making a motion for the two
motions, is that correct?
two motions for the
Right.
two variances.
We'll do the one in the 7 foot tall fence first.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I make a motion that we give the variance for the 7-foot fence.
And I second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? None seen. Motion carries. Now we're going to move on to the second variance, which is, tell them again, Manny.
Sure, the 6 foot fence along Rotherham we've been discussing.
Okay, this is the one where we have 10 or plus supporters, and we do have at least one remonstrator, is that correct? So I want the board to consider all of this. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Second motion that we give the variance for the second 6-foot fence.
And I approve, and I second, and
So you can open up for discussion or
What's the motion?
to approve.
to approve.
It's been seconded, so now you can have discussion and comment
Any
before a vote, if any.
Comment or discussion? I do have something to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't approve the variance as the fence staying where it is. I would recommend that the fence be moved back, as the staffer had mentioned, off of the edge of the street where it is, moved back 6 feet. I believe that's what it was.
Okay.
So you can't, just as a reminder, as folks are new, you can't attach conditions to an approval. So that would be a condition. Right. You would need to amend basically the first motion to add that condition if, as part of your discussion, you choose to do that.
Okay,
Or
can
you
we
can vote on it
ask
currently.
Judge Wells?
You can. You can ask the petitioner
Okay.
what they would be willing to entertain.
Okay. So we have a motion on the second one. And I appreciate all the letters and the testimony and everybody. And I understand about the trees. And I understand that it's real easy to read the ordinances and not always understand them. Would you be willing to move the fence back on the side 6 feet or to the corner of the house?
Judge, could you approach the podium, please? State your name.
I would say I would prefer not to have to move the fence. The ground, I don't know how familiar you are with the land in that area, but it's awful. And it is very difficult to pierce the ground and dig and put anything at a depth like that, planting trees, anything like that. It's always been a challenge in that area. And we have vegetation die because of that frequently. But I would prefer not to move the fence back. The other problem is if we move back, as right now it's about a foot off the sidewalk, maybe 10 inches to a foot. If we go back, we're into those trees, and we would have to, as my wife said, probably take down a tree to go down 6, maybe 2 trees, but we're also into the roots of the trees. And I'm afraid that's going to be too difficult to plant new posts in that location to be at 6 foot. And then if we go to the house, we are back. I'm trying to recall how you guys, my plans are over there, but you guys have them in front of you. I want to say it's something like 25, 30, maybe 40 feet from a sidewalk to my house. So we would be eroding at that point hundreds of square feet of the backyard that would be protected by the fence to go right along the house line. So I would prefer not to have to move given those considerations. And I think, testimony from Officer Ferrer has indicated that, the safety concerns and the privacy concerns that we have are, in the neighborhoods is given more weight than the pedestrian on the sidewalk. So
Any
that's what.
questions from the board?
Well, then I guess my question to the board, attorney, if we don't grant this variance, then does he have to lower the fence to the 3.5 foot?
Unless he appeals it, which he has every right to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call for a vote? Yep.
Okay.
Unless there's other comment.
Any more comments, concerns from the board? None seen. Okay, we're going to take, I will need a motion from someone.
There's already been a motion
Oh,
in a second, so
okay,
you just,
we're gonna
just
vote.
call the vote.
Okay, we're
Yep.
just going to call the vote. Okay. All those in favor of granting the motion, the second variance? See, Marston.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, we have 2 yeses, 2 nos. How about,
No.
so 3 nos and 2 yeses? Okay,
I agree to giving the variance.
okay, so we have 3 nos and 2 yeses. So the motion is denied.
Yep.
At this time, you do have the right to,
Reapply,
Reapply,
or you
yeah.
can appeal.
or appeal.
I ask a question?
Yes,
Do I need to come up with the mic?
yes, please, state your name.
Again, I'm new to this process. For consideration of a variant, because I'm going to need a variance at some level for whether I go to be at 6 feet, I guess, based on what I've heard from the city, or the county, I should say. So do I need to resubmit everything to seek a setback of, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 10, if I can somehow work around the trees to get that? Or is that something that can be considered at this point?
No, because an appeal would be to reverse the determination fully. Yeah. So,
And everything's been submitted, and I mean, if I want a variance in line with what the city planner recommended, can that be considered right now? Since everything's been submitted in the city, or it would seem redundant for the city to have to go back out and do
yeah,
another
unfortunately, you
report?
have to resubmit it again. But you could, go ahead, Linda.
Let me on my.
Sure.
So, the rules that the board operates under says that you cannot file another variance on the same property within 1 year's time after it's been denied.
Okay. But the board has the ability to suspend that rule.
They can't just waive it with a vote, it has to be an application with a legal
Right.
notice and all that.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I guess so I can't reapply? Is that what you're telling
You
me?
can, you just have to ask the board to suspend the 1 year rule and let you reapply. And we'll be asking for a variance for whatever you would ask at that point on the setback or whatever issue. So essentially, the board would consider, so you would say, hey, can you waive that rule, the 1 year rule? And the board would say yes or no, and if they say yes, then they would consider your subsequent variance application at another one of these.
So I'd have to go through the whole process again?
You can resubmit the same materials.
Right, understood, understood. I guess what I'm
Yes.
saying is I have to go through the whole entire process again.
On the second variance, yes.
Correct, right.
Yep. With the additional step of asking
Okay.
the board to suspend the 1 year rule.
Okay. What form does that take? Is that just an email, a request?
Do you have a form?
There a
or
form?
It'd just be a letter request. I've always done a letter request, but it's up to staff.
For zoning appeals, it's typically an approval petition, it's an actual full set of forms to fill out. Gets docketed, the notice is sent out just like any other.
I understand that, but for the rule suspension,
Right, that's what I'm talking about. It's almost like a separate variance process.
the rule suspension is?
Yes.
Oh, that's,
The way the rules read is that it's upon an approval petition being granted with notice. It's not just them making a motion. For the MDC or the council, yes, you can do that, but the BZA specifically says it's a full hearing.
I just want them to have to go through that process. And what I've done previously is allow it to be a letter request. And the BZA could consider at its next meeting. And then that would either trigger him filing something or not.
I haven't read the
Yeah.
rules in a while, but the way it's done in Indy is a full hearing.
Sure. So we'll look at that. It might be that you just have to write a letter requesting the suspension.
I mean, this meeting is still open. What can I do at this point, right now? I mean, the board is still here with a quorum,
But it's made its decision on the second variance
right?
request.
Can it make another decision on why I see the city council do that kind of stuff all the time?
Do what, reverse its prior decision? You
Or
can-
amend it.
You can ask for it to reconsider with a condition.
Am I allowed to speak?
I would love to
Would
make
you
that
want
request.
that?
Am I allowed to speak?
Sure.
Because I understand your frustration, but I also know that I'm new and 3 of the board members are new, and I get very nervous when I don't know the rules.
Mm-hmm.
I know you want a decision made today. I literally don't know the rules, and I don't want to sign off on anything as the secretary.
Right.
It sounds like what I'm hearing from her is that if we can get, you can petition us, not us, but them,
Right.
to then petition the city to say they can override that rule.
But-
Which just seems like that's your only option.
I mean,
There are three options.
Okay.
One option is you go back, you ask for the suspension of the 1-year rule, and you reapply, whether it's the same request or a different request. You go through the process again. That's option number one. Option number two is you appeal the decision of the denial of the second variance. You have 30 days to do that, and all the rules are in there.
right.
Option three potentially is for you to ask the board to reconsider its decision with a condition.
I would respectfully ask the board to reconsider its decision with a condition.
What condition would be acceptable to the board, if any? You don't have to do.
I guess I would like to hear more from the board's concern. I mean, there wasn't much discussion, and then it was just a no. So, I mean, I tried to provide all the context, all the, concerns we have. A lot of folks came in support, and, this is an issue that, I think rises above any other things that go on, and I'm just looking to try to protect my family, and more months and months more of process and applications and fees and all of that, and the specter of more people calling and reporting that don't live in the neighborhood is something that I really don't want to deal with. So if we can have a discussion and get a condition and something approved today, I would really appreciate
Can
it.
I make a motion?
Could you go ahead and offer a condition to the board?
Well, I guess I would go with what the city or the county planner recommended in their application, and that was 6 feet? Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead and approach and state your name. That's all right.
Ashley Wells. I guess maybe a suitable compromise, would you permit granting the variance if we took our fence to the tree line, which may not be exactly 6 feet, but it might be closer to 5 or 4.5, which would still, I guess I'm, like I said, I'm a little unclear as to why the variance wasn't granted, but I'm assuming it's, you feel the view is impeded. I guess I'm not sure. If you guys could maybe explain to us what would be a suitable compromise where we can rectify this.
Okay,
And
so you're thinking between 4 and 5 feet.
yes, because like I said, we have 3 trees. To get that fence put in, we had to pay an astronomical amount of money because every post was considered a hard dig. And in our fencing contract, that meant we had an additional, I think it was about $50 added on to every post for them to hard dig by hand every post in that ground. That's because the wooded lot next to us where the new house was constructed was so wooded and the trees were huge and old. All those roots are on our property. So we would have to pay another astronomical amount to move the fence because it would again be considered hard digs. So I guess I'm asking for a compromise in this way where we not only don't have to lose our trees, if we have to relocate the fence, what would be acceptable to the board?
Okay, so let me know if I'm understanding you correctly, that you are willing to go 4 feet.
I think that would probably be the easiest way to move it based on the roots and the tree lines. Otherwise, there's no way of moving that 6 feet. Just based on where the trees are, it would be more like 10 to 12, which greatly takes away from our yard usage. We wanted to utilize those trees and the yard. That's why we did that, and because of the tree line. So you guys have denied the second variance, but what would be a suitable compromise, I suppose?
Okay, I would like for the board to,
I have a question.
Sure, go
I have
ahead.
a concern. When you're talking about this 2 feet, I don't see where it's gonna make that much difference. Maybe I'm wrong. And then we're talking about the roots of these trees. We don't know how deep these roots are and how they proceed. I lived in a home where they had a lot of older trees and everything, and I would certainly hate to see someone lose these trees. And if it does make the neighborhood look nicer and everything, what are we accomplishing, I guess, by the 2 feet? This isn't gonna help the variance that much, and we're talking about these roots. How do we know how far back we can go without hurting these trees? And I don't have the answer to that, but I'd like to know it.
any comments, concerns?
You know, there are rules and laws for a reason, and yes, we get the opportunity to give variances, but they still are there for reasons. And whether somebody thinks it's a nice fence, it is a nice fence. I've driven over and looked at it twice to make sure that I was comfortable with not only the pictures, but the way it was setting. So I've looked at it from the front, both sides, on the sidewalk. It's not a traffic problem other than the fact that it sits right next, I think foot traffic is a problem. But you didn't do your due diligence before you put the fence in. And now it's like you're trying to make us feel bad because we didn't grant you your variance. And I offered you an option of which you said you weren't willing to look at.
Well, I don't think he said he was unwilling, sir. I think he said he would prefer not to because of the cost to do that and because of our yard usage, and that people have spoken on behalf of the fence, and there's no safety concern. Even our own police say there's no safety concern. And because of all the stated reasons, we're not trying to make you feel guilty. We're just asking you to understand our position, that we're just trying to protect our family. And I never could have imagined that a fence would have caused so much trouble. Like I said, we never knew that that fence would be considered a front yard. We had a 4-foot chain link before. We would have just kept it at that point had we known, because it would have saved us money.
I mean,
If
I
we
want you
took
to
it-
understand, my heart goes out to you. My first question when hearing all of this was, how did the city building inspector allow them to bring in that much dirt? Because it's always been told by the building inspector that you cannot change the flow of water. No matter what you want to do. You want to put in a French drain, you want to bring in more dirt, you want to bring in gravel, you want to change your driveway, you can't change the flow of water. So how your neighbor was able to do that boggles me, number one. Number two, yes, it's a bad situation for y'all, and I understand completely. But there's still guidelines that we all have to follow, whether we agree with them or not, whether the police agree with them or not, whether my neighbors agree with them or not. So my question to you then is, if we grant this with a 6-foot drop back, is that something that you all could work with?
Well, I suppose at this stage, that's our only option, correct? I mean, I'm unsure how that house, it's not my property. We did our best to get drains, but I mean, for months and months and months, sat piles and piles of dirt that eroded my entire backyard on that area too. My yard is virtually ruined there. So I'm reminded of this constantly every day, as my backyard is a sloshy mud pit. So I can't answer or speak to that property.
Yes.
And I might say that I understand what you're saying, and that's correct, and how the gentleman, they were able to do this with the ground and the building committee. I'm like you, I don't understand that either. But on the other hand, we are also than saying that because it's not their fault, because someone else didn't do their job, then we are denying them something that is gonna really be a problem, I think, as far as the trees and everything. So possibly, is there something, an agreement we could come to that maybe grant it, but if they choose to move or something, then it has to be taken down or it has to be lowered? I don't know, but I think that there's so many possibilities here that are not any of our problem or theirs, but we have to work with them because it was done prior to what we heard. So I agree with you, it should have never been done to start with.
We've lost so many trees already with that lot being cleared out, and I know that was their prerogative, but I would hate to have to cut down those 3 trees, and if we moved it 6 feet, like I said, it would be right on that tree line. It's impossible.
Can I,
Yeah,
I want to
Yeah,
make
let's
a
hear from
motion real
staff.
quick.
one suggestion that might help, and then Linda, if the concern is the tree issue, and if you're allowing it to move forward, I would say do at least 5 or 6 feet. Because then if they decide, hey, I don't want to cut a tree down if it's right at 6, and they go to 9 or 10, they can do that, and that makes it better, I think, from your standpoint, from safety.
Yeah, I was actually
Linda,
going to
do you
say
wanna-
4 to 5 feet.
Okay,
so
yeah,
that,
right.
So that
I would
we're
say
not
at least.
we're not infringing on the trees.
So I would suggest that you say at least 4 to 5 feet, because
Yeah.
that way if they hit it 4, great. But if they need to move it to 10, they can do that too. They don't have to come back here. But Linda, go ahead.
I just want to address the 6 foot. I came up with that number. It's a little bit arbitrary. I thought, at least my knowledge in the past on fence panels, that they're about 6 feet in length. So that was a natural number for me to select. I did look at the photo in figure 5 and thought that 6 feet back on that fence would not hit those trees, but it's close. And I'll give them that. I don't think fence posts would greatly impact tree roots. It's not like it's a building going in. But we're not as set on the 6 feet as we are at least about getting some setback.
Getting some
So if you
setback.
want to go to 4 or 5, staff would perfectly fine with that.
So Judge and Ms. Wells, would you be okay with the at least 4 feet language?
Yes, if
Because that
the,
way you're not tied to a specific number. And I don't want, some
Right.
issue to come back and go, hey, they built at 10, when that, from some of the board's perspective, is even better,
right.
to be a violation.
I guess now hearing from the board a little bit of their concern, I think, yes, that's an acceptable motion. And I do think, at least the way I read the report, was the trees were where they came up with the 6. So I would say, I went out there and I've measured it all again and looked at the roots and everything like that. And I do think 4 is probably a safer spot for the trees, but I think that language would provide the flexibility. And yeah, if we get out there and we think it's going to impact the trees, that gives us the flexibility to go further.
Okay, so go ahead. I would just say at least 4. So
From the
I would
sidewalk?
say 2 things. Yeah, from the sidewalk.
Okay.
From the sidewalk. Or if you want to, from its current position, because then whatever the calculation is, so it doesn't impact it. So technically, just to make it clear, I would say withdraw your prior vote and then make a new motion if you're so inclined with that condition, and that would.
Nothing like a mulligan on a first meeting, guys.
No, it's complicated. It's important stuff.
We're all learning today.
Complicated every time, so.
So,
That's right, Marge. It's complicated every time.
so
Okay, so I make a motion that we reevaluate the second variance.
Okay. So does the board withdraw its prior vote in that case? Yeah.
rescind the prior vote on the second variance.
Yeah.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, I'm making a motion to
Rescind.
look at the second variance. Should we put the condition in, or we change it?
Oh,
you have to do
so
two things.
rescind, withdraw your prior
Okay.
vote.
We're looking at re-voting on the second variance.
Okay.
Second that. But you,
I have
we
a
have to make
second.
two separate
Make a
motions,
motion.
so you need to make a motion to
Can you make a
rescind.
motion?
Okay, I make a motion that we reevaluate our vote on this second variance.
Rescind the
You have to
prior.
Rescind the
and
prior.
then
Okay.
reevaluate.
We have a second?
I second.
So we have a second.
All right, what's the motion?
To rescind,
Yes.
okay.
So we have,
Okay.
we have the second. Motion carries. Okay,
Let's just be sure. All
Yeah,
in favor?
yeah.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None seen.
All right, so
Motion
now
carries.
make a motion with whatever condition you feel is appropriate.
Okay,
On the
I make a
second-
motion
second
on the
variance.
second variance that the fence in question on Rotherham be moved back at least 4 feet from the sidewalk.
Is that condition acceptable to the petitioner?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
we'll need a second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None seen. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. So petitioner has a reasonable amount of time to comply.
Yeah, what is the time?
It's not set.
Okay.
The board could have set it, it didn't. So
Okay.
it's whatever is reasonable. Usually 60 days probably is safe, but if you run into trouble.
I'm just worried about
digging in the middle of
weather
winter.
is my only
Yeah,
concern.
digging in the middle of winter when the ground's frozen might be an issue.
Right.
If you run into a timeline issue, I would say email the board, just so that nobody is, from a compliance standpoint, is coming out.
Okay, and I'll just let you know, we'll get the contractor out as soon as we can, at least to get the specs together, so that we have it, but as soon as the weather's good, then we can get it done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think the next item here is to have a approval of the minutes, our last meeting.
Yes.
Do we have all the signatures we need? I know there were a lot of copies going around. Mayor, Jim,
Jim.
could you come up here? Tell me which one of these are the minutes that we need to have signed. I think it's this one.
Her last name is, her first name's C-E-L-E-N-A.
Thank you,
That's this
Dave.
one.
I appreciate that.
I don't know, though, I'm kind of liking this Salina thing.
I was named after Salina, Tennessee. Isn't that terrible?
Sign that. I have to make a motion to approve the minutes, correct?
Yes.
Marcia.
Marcia, you already signed it.
I've already
I already
done.
done it.
Oh, she's already got
To
that.
me. Yeah. that's it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. We need a second.
I make a second.
Okay.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None seen. Motion carries. I think that's it. Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All those in favor?
Because you handle my nap time.
Motion carries.